Well, 2 months after my move, I still haven't set up a filming corner, so this is just gonna have to do. Yeah, this over here is the best I could do. The important thing is here, which is I'm in Queens. Yep, can't wait to find out how much the YouTube algorithm will punish me for not producing content. So a couple of weeks ago, I got asked onto the podcast Musicalsplaining to explain a thing or a few about The Wizard of Oz. I only had the night to prepare, but I wanted to refresh my memory and make sure I could drop a couple of hot takes about the Oz oeuvre in case the conversation required it. I'm not an expert, I just play one on YouTube. Now, one thing I knew I should probably brush up on for the podcast was L. Frank Baum's awfully racist editorials from the 1890s, which pretty much boiled down to, well, we've already killed a lot of Native Americans, so what if we just killed the rest because I'm afraid of them? My idea was to make the point of, well, he certainly didn't learn that from his mother-in-law, even though she had a bit of racist nonsense herself in her career. Then I soon realized after a quick search that I had combined two completely unrelated Mrs. Gages in my recollection. And this, friends, is why we fact-check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. As we bid adieu to Women's History Month, allow me to explain. To be fair, I think my momentary bout of confusion over two white women from the 19th century could have happened to anybody. After all, Frances Dana Barker was born 1808 and married James L. Gage in 1829. She worked closely with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in the early women's rights movement in America, was an abolitionist, supported the temperance movement, and was well known for her writing and speeches. While Matilda Joslin was born in 1826 and married Henry H. Gage in 1845. She worked closely with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in the early women's rights movement in America, and was an abolitionist, supported the temperance movement, and was well known for her writing and speeches. Now here's where my brain was trash and crossed the streams. In 1851, Frances Gage presided over the Women's Rights Convention held in Akron, Ohio, and her opening speech attracted widespread attention to the suffragette movement. And at that convention, she also invited Sojourner Truth to speak. You may have heard of it. It's a pretty famous speech that we unfortunately have Frances to blame for. Let me explain. So the abolitionist movement in the 1850s was just really trying to lay all the blame on the Southern plantation system while slavery had just been abolished in states like New York. You know what? Yes, let's use New York as an example for the class. New York passed a Gradual Emancipation Act that freed slave children born after July 4th, 1799, but indentured them until they were young adults. In 1817, a new law passed that would free slaves born in New York State before 1799, but not until 1827. But even then, complete abolition wouldn't pass in New York State until 1841, when a law was revoked that allowed non-residents to hold slaves that they brought into the state for up to 9 months. So 10 years after actual complete abolition in New York State, Sojourner Truth gives her speech in Akron. Now there's a whole nother video to be made about Sojourner Truth's early life, but then I'd probably have to do a deep dive into 1830s religious cults, and they always turn out to be sex cults. But the point is, Sojourner Truth had been born and enslaved in New York State. Her first language was Dutch. But by the 1860s, the emphasis among abolitionists was how wretched and inhumane the Southern plantation system was. So if, say, you were trying to offer a white public an example of a black woman who had been a slave speaking extemporaneously about her experience facing injustice as a black woman, it only made sense to Frances Gage to add a little flourish. In 1863, 12 years after the convention, Frances Gage decided to transcribe Sojourner Truth's speech from memory, and in the process decided to zhuzh it up to make it sound blacker, or more like what white people would expect an ex-slave to sound like. You know, for the cause. There was an earlier version published in the Anti-Slavery Bugle in 1851, and you can visit the SojournerTruthProject.com to compare the two versions, which explains, by changing Truth's words and her dialect to that of a stereotypical Southern slave, Frances Gage effectively erased Sojourner's Dutch heritage and her authentic voice, as well as unintentionally adding to the oversimplification of the American slave culture and furthering the eradication of our nation's northern slave history. Frances Gage admitted that her amended version had given but a faint sketch of Sojourner's original speech, but she felt justified and believed her version stronger and more palatable to the American public than Sojourner's original version. Frances's version is ahistorical and it smacks of minstrel once you know the truth. But unfortunately, Frances's version of Ain't I a Woman is still having to be untaught. But here's something nice I'll say about Frances, and this is saying something. Unlike many leading suffragettes of her day, she didn't demand that white women's rights trump racial justice. Which after the 1870s, I can assure you, that kind of thinking was the exception to the rule. Just look at Ida B. Wells's anti-lynching battle, and her having to deal with Frances Willard, head of the hella conservative Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, who flamed white racism in support of white women's voting rights. Willard very much tried to make hay of how white women had to get the vote, so that black violence could be stopped because white women wanted prohibition and black people drank too much, and I wish I was joking about this huge leap in racist logic. You know what? Instead of quoting Willard, I'm just going to let you go and read the NPR article about Wells versus Willard in the description below. Meanwhile, Frances Gage didn't support adding female suffrage to the 15th Amendment because she felt that push would make it more likely to fail, and to her, it was important not to delay the right to African American men to vote as their race suffered the greater wrong. And that barest minimum is saying something. And that's who I was misremembering L. Frank Baum's mother-in-law with. Matilda Jocelyn Gage was one of the younger members of the suffragette set, and was a co-founder of the National Women's Suffrage Association, or NWSA, and co-author of the first 3 volumes of History of Women's Suffrage. However, she was eventually elbowed out of the NWSA for being too liberal. And by liberal, I mean being unwilling to separate out white women's rights from greater racial wrongs and other concerns. To circle back around to why she came to mind while thinking of L. Frank's awful editorials, a part of her liberal progressivism that made her so unpalatable to an increasingly conservative suffragette movement was her defense and admiration of Native American nations like the Haudenosaunee. She was even adopted into the Wolf tribe of the Mohawk Nation in 1893. Which again makes L. Frank's editorials about the Sioux Nation while he was living in South Dakota even more of a yikes. Among other things, Matilda also wrote on women's significant accomplishments in invention, military affairs, and in history, and the Matilda effect is named. Saying in honor of her feels weird, but it's definitely a hat tip to her for recognizing the bias in the first place. The Matilda effect is when the achievements of women scientists are overlooked, or when their accomplishments are accredited to their male colleagues. Which is ironic, as according to Sally Roche Wagner, she was written out of history. It is not about her importance. It is about a political act of erasure. It was done by an increasingly conservative, racist, and classist Christian women's suffrage movement. Anyway, even though I caught myself in time and didn't actually mix up the two Gages in an incredibly embarrassing moment on a podcast, now I have told you all about that super embarrassing mix-up I almost did. And now you know, because the algorithm demands it. All hail the algorithm. All hail. Thank you to my ear lenders, Catherine Escobar, Spectral Ghost, Jason Lucas, John Smith, Allison J., Avi Finkel, Johan Gustafsson, Chandra, William Christopher, Steve Harper, and Xantha Pink. And here we are, postcards. It's great. We're going to be able to knock out the November and December postcards, which means we'll finally be done with 2020. Yay! It's almost like I'm catching up or something. Anyway, but we actually have a couple postcards from Robert Gill, including 2 letters. So the first postcard, also dated November 4th, from Robert. Figured I'd send you an extra postcard in support of the USPS. Considering that the Dodgers won the World Series, this one seems suitable. It beats silhouetted palm trees. I've never actually seen the Dodger Stadium, so now I can say I've seen it in postcard form. But before that, Robert sent this postcard, which reads, "Greetings from Monravia. This postcard features the Los Angeles Arboretum, which is just one town west of me. Because the Arboretum gift shop is currently closed, it took a bit of trouble finding this postcard, but I wanted to send something besides a standard Los Angeles postcard." And that is a very lovely postcard, which actually I have to put like this, because it's a reflection of in a lake, of a building and palm trees and a lovely tree. So that makes me actually want to visit this arboretum. I love a good arboretum. But then this card came in from Robert a couple of days later. This one reads, "The Arboretum gift shop reopened recently, so I figured I would check out what recent postcards they have available. A photo of the waterfall is just what I was hoping to find, so here's that to add to your collection." And yes, that is a great waterfall, by the way. It's like, it looks so lush and beautiful, which is not something you would expect from LA, so Lord love an arboretum. And then Robert also sent 2 letters with a recipe in it, and the letters I'm not going to read, but it was for his version of a recipe from a Zelda game, Yato's Superb Soup. And the recipe calls for 2 acorn squashes, a medium onion, 5 cloves garlic, smoked mackerel, vegetable stock, white wine, goat cheese, and basil. I'm a little intrigued and terrified of the smoked mackerel, if I'm going to be completely honest. But it looks like a manageable recipe, so I might have to give it a try. And if I do, I'll let you know. But thank you, Robert, for sending me all those postcards and the recipes and your letters. I really appreciate it. Next from November is a card from Brianna. This hails from Augusta, Georgia. It's a picture of Alaska, however, the inside passage. "Nella, this postcard is from my first Alaskan cruise in 2011. Now I work on cruise lines. I've been following your videos since 2008 or so, and I love your stuff and the way you tell stories. Once cruises come back and I go back to work, I can send you postcards from all the ports I visit if you want. I hope you stay safe and well, Brianna." Brianna, I will never say no to postcards from people's work travels. Are you kidding me? If you've got them, send them to me. I'd love to see them and I'd love to give them a read. And I hope you are too staying safe and well. And I'm really sorry that you got grounded while cruise lines are not safe to travel on right now. But hopefully one day that changes, because Lord knows I got lots of friends who love a good cruise. So over to our December cards. Now we're getting into the more Christmassy season that was, 3 months ago, but so it goes. Oh, yes. Well, this looks like a very lovely meditation garden. Fortunately, there doesn't, there's like a big sticker blocking it. And it's the rock garden of Ranji Kyoto, and the rest is in Japanese, so I can't read that. But actually, I'm just going to peel this whole thing off so I can actually read it. Oh, Alan. Oh, it's Alan Ollie. Hey, Alan. Alan, your handwriting is fantastic. "Dear Nella, you've inspired me to send some postcards I've had lying around for years. This is a card I was given on my 2010 trip to Japan. I hope the image instills some Zen calm in these troubled times. I think on Twitter, you suggested we emulate 18th century letter writers, and my only model for this is 1776. So do you need pins or saltpeter? I recall reading letters from World War II that end wishing for a victorious New Year. I wish you a healthy and sane 2021. Yours pleasantly, Alan Ollie, from Ontario, Canada." I'm going to have to go with pins on this one. So yes, all the pins, especially if they're Disney pins. I will never say no to a Disney pin. Next, we have this card of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Just such a good episode. And this one reads, "Hi Nella, ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? This is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek. Cheers, Keith." Yes. Most excellent Star Trek episode. I love it. You also used a Star Trek Canadian stamp? Or is it already, like, wait, hang on. Wait, are these like pre-stamped? I've never seen this before. I'm fascinated. Okay. I love it. Here for it. Next is a postcard of Lake Tahoe, postmarked from Reno, Nevada. And it reads, Nella, you are the best. Thank you for all the weird and wonderful things you've taught us. Patrick and Sam. Thank you, Patrick and Sam. And also look at Lake Tahoe. Look at that place. It's so green. One day I'll visit Lake Tahoe. I have a whole, romp around the West I have to do at some point in my life when it's safe. And then we have this card. It's a very lovely printed. The front cover is of the straw goat. Oh, it's that thing from that country that I don't remember. I'm gonna have to look it up. There's an Instagram, however, for Spectral Ghost. That's spectral.ghost. So I'm definitely gonna check out that Instagram. And it says, may this season be a manageable one, which I absolutely feel like that's about my 2021 goals. Just manageable. I would just like everything to be manageable, thank you. Warm greetings this holiday season. While this isn't a postcard, hopefully this fine lad finds you and yours well. Devoted fan of Nella Explains and ABC keeps me very good company during my workday. Keep safe and warm wishes. Thank you so much, Spectral Ghost, for this postcard. I really enjoy the design on this, actually. But anyway, yes, that catches us up. From November to December, 2020 postcards are done. Finished. Now I have to go check the P.O. box at some point to see what else has come in, which I'm sure, hopefully, is a lot. I mean, it's always disappointing when I go there and the P.O. box is empty. So if you would like to send me a postcard, now that I've moved in and I'm technically trying to figure out my new filming corner, you can send me a postcard, details in the description below. On that note, thank you for watching, support me on Patreon, and until next time.